was Dan's tribe not listed among the 144,000? Well, today we're going to find out, but first let's see what happened on earth since our last session. With the continuation of the seal judgment, the sixth seal has brought a great earthquake, the sun turning black, the whole moon becoming like blood, and the stars falling to the earth. Also, the sky has split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island have moved out of their place. The people of the earth have hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. A great fear has fallen on mankind. You know, God predicts and describes these events in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. God had a plan from the very beginning. Let's look at a couple of verses and compare them. Isaiah 2:19 tells us, "They shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth from the terror of the Lord and the glory of his majesty when he arises to shake the earth mightily." God let us know a long time ago that this time period was coming and that it would be awful. Joel 2:31 is similar. "The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord." Revelations and Joel both tell us about the cosmic disturbances that take place on the earth before the great and awesome day of the Lord. The great and awesome day of the Lord is just another way of describing Jesus' second coming at the end of the tribulation. Let's meet our next group of people who we're going to record on our worksheet. Revelation 7:4 introduces us to this group. "And I heard the number of those who were sealed. 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed." God marks 144,000 Jews from each tribe except the tribe of Dan and Ephraim. The speculation is that Dan's tribe was heavy into idol worship, therefore not selected to spread the gospel of the Messiah. But stop. Which one of the tribes did not go into idolatry? Is this not why all the Israel went into captivity? There are several times the tribes of Israel are listed in the Bible. Let me throw some at you. The first column is the birth order of the sons of Joseph. The second column is a listing from Numbers where Moses took the first census of Israel in the wilderness. Notice here the tribe of Levi isn't listed. God is having Moses record the names of the warriors. The priests don't go into war, but there's still 12 tribes. Notice Joseph is not listed either, but is replaced by his two sons. Remember, Jacob gave Joseph a double portion in his blessing to his grandsons Ephraim and Manasseh back in Genesis 48. The third column is a list of the tribes which were mentioned in the Song of Praise written by Deborah when her and Barak defeated King Sisera's army. No reference of Levi, of course, but neither are Simon and Judah listed. The fourth column is taken from Ezekiel 48, where the millennial division of land is listed. Here, Dan is actually the first one in the list when you read the list from the Bible. Did you notice there are 15 land divisions? So, who is Zadok? A faithful servant, which we'll discuss more in session 17. But who is this prince that also receives a land grant? "Then they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob, my servant, where your fathers dwell. And they shall dwell there, they, their children, and their children's children, forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever." David rules over Jerusalem, and Jesus rules over the world. Remember back in session 3, we discussed the things which were promised to David? Sometime read Ezekiel 46, 1 through 18 to discover what all the prince is responsible for in the millennial worship service in the temple. Now for the fifth column. This list comes from Ezekiel 48, 30 to 35, which names the exit gates from Jerusalem during the millennial time period. My thoughts as to why Dan and Ephraim are not listed among the 144,000. These 144,000 Jews will be alive here on the earth when the rapture takes place. I simply don't think there's any living survivors from the tribe of Dan alive at the time of the rapture. But you can decide. So what are these 144,000 going to be doing on earth during the tribulation period? We know they're going to be protected for a time during this period. Let's fast forward to the fifth trumpet judgment. There we're told when the fifth trumpet is blown, the locusts from the bottomless pit will be released. These locusts were commanded that they could only harm those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So what are they going to be doing? In Revelation 7:3, the angel refers to them as servants. Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. Let me pause and give you a hint that might help keep saints and servants divided into different people groups. When you read the word saints, think Gentiles, people who are not Jewish descendants, and think people who believe in Jesus as the Messiah and God. When you see the word servant, servants the prophets, servants of God, think Jews. Paul refers to himself as a servant and is charged of explaining God's great mystery in 1 Corinthians 4:1. In other words, Paul is an evangelist. I do believe these folks are given the job of evangelizing the population of earth during the tribulation period. And the redeemed or their work are seen in heaven, which leads to our next group of people, or box. But first, let's go back to what's taking place in heaven. Revelation 7:9-17 starts with, after these things. Therefore, we don't know how much time has elapsed since the 144,000 have been marked. But we can get a clue. Revelation 7:14 tells us John is talking with an angel asking from where did they come? They being our next group of people. And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, These are the ones who come out of the Great Tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. The Great Tribulation is the last 3 years of the 7 years identified in Daniel. Jesus himself used this phrase in Matthew 24:21 when he was describing the abomination of desolation and the man known as the Antichrist. So we might assume this scene is at the end of the tribulation. This group of people could possibly be the converts gained by the work of the 144,000 evangelists mentioned earlier. We also find this is a very large crowd, that they are from every nation, tribe, race of people, and language of the earth. Now let's see what they're wearing and carrying. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, people, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. There's our white robes again. Remember, white robes are only given to the pure and worthy. But what about the palm branches that they're carrying? Another time in the Bible we see the use of palm branches is the Lord's entrance into Jerusalem days before his death. In John 12:13, a multitude of people were waving branches before the Lord as he rode into Jerusalem, a time of celebration. They said, Hosanna, which is actually the Hebrew word for save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel, which is exactly the same verse that's in Psalms 118:26. The crowd spontaneously fell into celebrating the way they have always done, described in Leviticus during the Feast of Tabernacles, taking branches of palm trees and boughs of thick trees and willows of the brook, and ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. But this was the Passover, not the Festival of Tabernacles. This huge crowd of people saying Hosanna are mostly Jews. The Jews were in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. But the crowd John sees are from every nation. Remember, we're back at the pre-cross time. The believers in heaven are not part of the bride of Christ. Remember, that is the church age. But they are waiting for Jesus' second coming. And God is preparing this great multitude of people we're seeing in heaven with palm branches in their hands to celebrate Jesus' return as king. Another thought is a palm frond is an ancient symbol of victory, so these branches could be a symbol of victory over Satan, they're losing their lives for refusing to take his mark. Let's look at where these multitude of people and where they are standing. The last group was under the altar, but not this group. From Revelation 7:9, we find this group is standing before the throne and before the Lamb. But verse 15 tells us, therefore they are before the throne of God. Don't miss that little word AND in verse 9. Putting the two together, it seems the scene is God sitting on his throne and Jesus is there by his side. So the key points to remember from this section, from this group of saints here, they are standing before God's throne, wearing white robes and carrying palm branches. Let's catch up on our worksheet. Erase one of the green boxes on the earth in the tribulation section and draw a new green box, green because we have all nations here, under God's throne located in the millennial section. Draw a little palm branch on this box so we can keep it separate from the martyrs under the altar. Later we find these different groups all have different roles in the 1,000-year reign. Also, let's mark one of the blue boxes on earth with a star so we can remember they are marked 144,000 on earth. More to come about these folks later. Just as a reminder, this green box represents the saints of the Great Tribulation who are from all nations. And don't forget, by erasing a box on earth, we're indicating their death and drawing a new one in a different location, indicating where they go after they die. Until next time, shalom.